I'm Jean McEwan-Short and I'm a senior lecturer in community education at the University of Dundee. And today I'm going to talk a bit about some research that I undertook and just talk through that. So I'm calling this Community Development Dialogue and Sagacious Relationships for Social Change, and I'll focus on those relationships throughout as I go through this. My research was about illuminating community development practice and doing that by foregrounding practitioners' perspectives on their approaches. As I think you were talking about, Marianne, one of the central things for me in thinking about how to do the research was connecting with my kind of commitment to community development values and principles. And in order to kind of try and stay with that, I used dialogue as a central concept in gathering the data, and kind of further developed paired interviewing into what I was calling dyadic dialogical interviewing, interviewing people in pairs together, but using a process of open flowing dialogue to allow the data to unfold, to allow the presentations to unfold in an uninterrupted manner, really. So the result is kind of very, very lengthy, engaged, in-depth discussion between two community development practitioners on their practice. So with little input from me, apart from to reflect, ask questions that came up at the time, community development practitioners are sharing their practice. I think that one of the things that allowed to do also was that the practice was revealed in a way that both participants could validate each other's perspectives, but equally challenge each other, and that happened throughout, which was an interesting part of it. So I kind of think of it as a community development inspired research method, really. It wasn't for me to determine the focus. It wasn't for me to come with pre-organized questions. I think it kind of that flowing dialogical interviewing process lends itself to the democratization of social research. I'm going to focus around really what the kind of some of what was revealed across the dialogue. So, I mean, I think that the real strength in this research is in the revealing of the dialogues and them being portrayed in this short kind of period of time. I'm just going to try and focus in on the messages that came across and give you little snippets of the dialogue. And focus on 4 different areas of work in which two of the community development workers were working with people living in substandard housing and activating for change. Another 2 working alongside people in urban areas. They're all in Scotland with high levels of deprivation and acting collectively on the complex social ramifications of life and poverty. Another 2 building community with young people as what they described as transformative counterculture in striving to challenge marginalisation. And the other 2 working with women who were involved in prostitution to represent the realities of the women's lived experiences and to challenge for social, cultural and political awareness of that. I would say that all of the dialogues, across the dialogues, there was a kind of, the power of community development practice was represented as being grounded in an analysis of injustice, and that was across the board. Importantly, the community workers' critiques of social, political, economic and cultural inequalities, and how that understanding underpins their every move in their practice. And this is important, but it's not delimited to their versions of that injustice, and that's where the sagacious relationships come in, really. Rather, it's coupled with the hearing of the truths of people's lived experiences in communities and in their mutual speaking out of the social violence they endure hidden in plain sight. So it's that mutual understanding, that mutual wisdom, that mutual connection that underpins everything that they do. There's a sense, and it's a fine Scottish phrase, of people aren't stupid being the prevailing attitude of the community workers throughout these dialogues, meaning that people in communities are not stupid. They have wisdom, agency. They know the experiences that they're living in, and that the community development workers were building relationships in which they would respect that, hear that, and work together with people in communities and learn from that. Really, that was a prevailing kind of theme across the dialogues. And that the community development workers practice consistently straddles their own intellectual understandings of the ramifications of systemic injustice, but while being enlivened by the learning from the community members' critical understandings of living their lives encircled by these ramifications. And that duality is of a crucial importance to their practice. And that's what I'm thinking of as sagacious relationships, really. Throughout, the community development workers in their dialogue revealed their learning, their engagement, and their working with people. Some were very, very articulate about their own learning process. And you can see here that one of the community development workers was just effusive around the learning processes that she went through. And I think that's one of the really important things that we have to think about as community development workers, not being in there as the expert, although of course having expertise. Here we have a community development worker learning the reality of women's lives, learning the reality of women who are involved in prostitution, and what was revealed as the day-to-day violence that they endure. The use of heroin to A, reduce the pain of it, but B, to limit behaviour so that it wouldn't further entice violence, and the limitations that the women were talking about in their lives. It was coming for me in waves, she said, and she kept coming back to this. It was really, really important. And here we see one of the community development workers who was involved in building counterculture with young people saying she's been personally, fundamentally changed by her encounters with the young people, learning from them, engaging with them, knowing that what they had to say, like we saw earlier with the young people in the video that Claire showed, that we have to learn from what they're saying. And another two who were involved in working with kind of people living in substandard housing, talking about what they referred to as the well-kent face, again, another fine Scottish phrase, that someone in the community who is really well known, very well connected in the community, really kind of the reliance on her for the community development process, for the work to kind of be successful, really. That she was as a community champion, that she knew community development, she would understand the theory, she would also speak with people in communities and engage in presentations and learning processes and training others, and that combined effort, that kind of mutuality, but I see that as taking it further, as really kind of ultimately learning from people in communities and moving to kind of to base the work on that combined understanding. The other thing that was really, really strong was that all of the practice was in some way or other having clear impact, either on policy, impacting on politicians, educating academics, local authorities, influencing planning, influencing, as we see here, influencing transport provision. Let me drink some water. So again, across the board, kind of impactful practice that was undertaken together. And here we see an example of women campaigning together to get transport back in place for people who rely on it, elderly people, people with disabilities, etc., and educating around that. So one of the things that is also really clear from what was coming through was that people in communities, people aren't stupid. The practitioners were also really clear that community development action was being undertaken with them as community workers, but also alongside them and also out with them. And they weren't the be all and end all in terms of being in communities with people, in terms of trying to strive for change. But alongside that, across the dialogues, we see theoretically grounded practice revealed. And it's portrayed as kind of strong, ideologically founded and politically motivated. And there's a real clarity of purpose that points to, in some ways, I think, that points to some of the challenges and criticisms of community development practice across the literature that suggests it's unthinking or uncritical. Criticality was right through these dialogues, and there's something for me about using the kind of open dialogical interviewing process and allowing these dialogues to flow that really revealed that in its depth. And I think that it reveals that the participants' voices in dialogue have a lot to offer theoretical perspectives on community development and need to be at the centre of them. They also need to be at the centre of you know, kind of education processes, working with students, etc., etc. So just to kind of add to that the dialogues reveal practice that is grounded in clarity of purpose and political intent. That was really strong. The community development workers are all witness to social suffering, and there's a sense across the board that the participants hope for fundamental social change and that they're driven by that hope and that desire and actions to try and push that kind of change. I think what I'll just kind of finish on is that desire was so strong right across the dialogues that it was often said that we have no choice but to act. We see these inequalities. We're working alongside people who are suffering at the, you know, underneath heavy social inequalities, and we have no choice but to act. But it came with quite a kind of level of impact on the community development workers as well. And I think that's one thing that we also have to be cognizant of, that this is hard work, it's challenging work, it's right at the edge of a lot of kind of painful knowledge, but also it can put the community development workers in the face of danger. And that was a reality in which the women who were working with the women in prostitution were threatened. There were other women in the dialogues and participants who were utterly exhausted by the weight of intention of social change. So I kind of close by saying courageous practice, important practice, political practice, and impactful practice right across the dialogues, and kind of there to be celebrated and respected. Thank you.